Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, guys, to Cincinnati's best ever real estate investor mastermind. I hope every single one of you is at least 6 feet socially distanced from every single other one of you. We can't keep our comments and questions 6 feet apart, though. So, Peter, there's a lot of comparison going on right now between the current economic climate and what happened on March 12th, where the Dow Jones Industrial and basically the entire New York Stock Exchange dropped 30% in a single day. There's a lot of comparing that to September 29, 2008 right now. From your experience, what did it feel like as the stock market crash of 2008 spread into the real estate industry in Cincinnati?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you, by the way, for having me. And thank you, Cody, for setting this up. And thank you, everyone, for coming. So it felt just as bad, right? It was horrible. And there was fear, for sure, just as there's fear now. I think the big difference is that in real estate, there were a lot of people who kind of felt like it wasn't going to impact real estate as much as it did. There was two things are different. One is the economic fundamentals of what's happening right now versus the economic fundamentals of 2008. And the other is, I think, kind of the emotional mindset of consumers and investors now versus the mindset back then. And when I say that, and I'll start with the mindset first, there was so much greed going on in that peak of 2005, 2006, tapering off into 2007 before that crash. And that greed was fostered by Main Street, right? When in DC they allowed Wall Street to chop up mortgages in terms of securities and sell them to insurance companies in Finland. There was this amazing opportunity to package bad loans with good ones and sell them overseas. And so that enabled us to, unfortunately, enabled the lending world to loosen up the criteria to qualify for a loan to the point where we had even things called liar loans, which were basically no doc loans, which means you basically said, my name is Peter, here's my social security number, I make $100,000 a year, you write on a napkin and you can get a mortgage for $300,000. I mean, it was crazy. So that greed generated by Wall Street, once they were allowed to commoditize these things, chop them up and commoditize them, trickled down to Main Street, and then everyday consumers started getting greedy. And then it became a game of hot potato, right? And people were just writing contracts on condominium projects and selling the contract to somebody else who would sell it to somebody else. So there was a ton of greed going on in our industry and in America in general back then. The interesting thing about now is that, number one, enough of us remember what that was like. And number two, the economic fundamentals of the residential real estate industry are strong. Were strong up until 3 weeks ago. The measures of a healthy, or the factors, the economic factors of the residential real estate industry are inflation and interest rates and GDP expansion and real income growth. And all of those fundamentals are strong up until 3 weeks ago. So I think because this happened so rapidly and because enough of us remember what it was like in 2008, I think people are more afraid than they were before. And I think there was a little bit more denial going on back in 2008.
If you could please speak a little more, Peter, to the comparison between what we're experiencing right now and what was experienced in the fourth quarter of 2008.
It's hard because this is happening real time, right? So sometimes it's a little bit difficult to make comparisons to a 3-month time period versus this 3 weeks that we've experienced so far. The interesting thing is that right now, if I point to all of the kind of the lag indicators of the residential real estate market, which is sales, we're still doing great. As you know, our sales team has had one of our best months ever. We sold 10 houses in the last 7 days, several of them in multiple offers. I mean, you would think that we're in this robust economic environment, but a sale is a lead indicator, a lag indicator. There's some lead indicators that have to happen first. which is someone has to raise their hand and say, I'm interested in real estate, get qualified, and choose to enter the market of the moment. And what we're seeing right now that we can't see until more time evolves is how much that has shrunk over the last 3 weeks. As you know, Slocomb, our team's conversion rate is about 4%, meaning on average, every 20 to 25 people we talk to, one of them will agree to work with us to purchase or sell or invest in real estate. In the last 3 weeks, that has dropped down to 1.2%. And so that's a lead indicator of future demand. So we've got to be able to look at what the lead indicators are, and those are pointing to a pretty steep drop off in activity. If you look at Keller Williams aggregate data, which is pretty representational of the world, of the country, right? We are the largest brokerage in the country. New appointments are down 50%. So we know that in the next 2 to 3 months, we should see activity drop by at least 50% in Cincinnati and in the country in general. And that, by the way, is a steeper drop than 2008, was my point.
Yeah, so when do the lag indicators of actual listings going on the market and pending and selling, when do those lag indicators really come into effect?
Okay. So you cut out for a little bit there, but I think the question was, when do we see the lag indicators show up? Or when do we see these lead indicators show up and what actually the economy of the industry is doing? So real estate is a 90-day business. So from the time somebody says, I'm interested in I have a real estate need, to the time you meet with them, educate them, transact, close, 90 days on average. In a hot market, it can be as little as 45 to 60 days. So we are 3 weeks into this. I think we're probably going to see, there's two things going on. We'll probably start seeing demand wane pretty seriously, which for the investors listening to this is kind of where their ears are going to perk up a little bit. We should start seeing demand wane for consumers in the next 2 to 3 weeks at the outside. And that's when prices should start to come down. If you think about the market of the moment from an investor's perspective, or just from the whole industry, we were experiencing a hot market. In fact, Cincinnati was experiencing the most acute seller's market it's ever seen during the first quarter of this year. Never been hotter. And so absorption rates were incredibly low. More than half of our inventory was selling in multiple offers. Like, it was hot. So while the coronavirus has become a thing and is definitely preventing new entrants or reducing the number of new entrants into the market, there are still all those people that sold during January and February who hadn't found a new home yet. They're motivated buyers, and they're going to buy over the next week to 3 weeks. And then all these lead indicators that are not showing up is going to show up in the market. So I would say really by the 15th of April, and I should never prognosticate because that's the fastest way to look dumb, is try and tell people what's going to happen in the future. But I think probably mid-April, we'll start seeing buyer activity wane significantly. And I think we're going to see corresponding shifts in prices.
If I'm struggling to get that work done, and I'm thinking, what is my window of opportunity to get my house on the market and get a good buyer and get it sold?
So I'm going to repeat the question because you were lagging a little bit there. If you're flipping a property right now and you're not quite done, what's your window of opportunity to get it sold, find a buyer, and lock in your return? A week.
Wow.
I would say, depending on the price point, right? Because there are segments of this market that were already have softened significantly. And there's segments that are still white hot, or warmer. If you're if you're first time buyer inventory, probably 2 to 3 weeks. If you are trade up inventory, you got like a week, 10 days. And I think we're going to start seeing this really, really hit hard. That's really that window of opportunity. Let me just say it simply: the lower your price point, the longer your window of opportunity. There will always be buyers and sellers in every single market segment, but we're going to see them contract by at least 50%, probably more as the price range increases. Because if you think about how a consumer buys, a lot of how a consumer buys is based on confidence. And when you start ticking up north of like $300,000, and especially over $500,000, which is considered luxury inventory in Cincinnati, a lot of consumers' confidence is derived in their net worth. And a lot of the average consumers have their net worth tied to what the market's doing. So if the markets have dropped 30%, you've got this huge shrinking in confidence. You're going to see the higher the price point, the faster it gets soft. And by the way, if you can't push this thing out the door in the next week, I'd be figuring out what are the cosmetic things you can do and have the offering at the price that you want, and just offer and just say, like, the roof will go on and be done by the time we close. Like, don't wait on that stuff. Get the cosmetic stuff done that needs to be done in order to get consumers through, so you can get a sale and finish on the back end, and just make that work a contingency to the contract that the buyers can review and approve.
Gotcha. I'm going to turn off my video just to see if that improves my internet connection. Let me know if I'm still chopping up.
Okay.
I am still here. I'll still be asking the questions. You just don't have to look at my face anymore.
Oh, that's disappointing.
So if I am looking to get a house or a property on the market, I need to do it ASAP because the activity is going to drop off.
Yeah, in fact, I'll tell you a personal story because I think stories are illustrative. Slocomb, I think you know this. I have a single family property I've owned since 2016. And my tenant's lease ended in June. And I created an incentive for her to end the lease early. She left, she moved out Friday. I had contractors over the weekend. Finished yesterday, photos today, on the market tomorrow morning. Because I think that the window is that tight that if you're going to do something, you got to move really, really, really quickly.
Yeah, I've been telling a lot of my clients the same thing, not just, the single family home in the suburbs, but also the duplex in Center City, Cincinnati. Everyone it's either shoot Luke or give up your gun.
Yeah, that's right.
So if values are going to drop and it's good to be a seller for the next week or so, then thinking as an investor,
mm-hmm.
the thing I want to ask now, thinking as an investor, it sounds like you're telling me that in maybe the third quarter of this year, maybe even before, everything is going on sale. So as an investor, should I be holding my breath and for how long?
Well, as an investor, my strategy was to, like Warren Buffett says, right? Be fearful when everyone is greedy, be greedy when everyone is fearful. The reason why I asked my tenant to move out quickly is because I wanted to pull my cash out of that property, keep the powder dry so I can reinvest it second half of this year. So yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. Probably not second quarter, I think, or probably not even early third quarter. What I think will happen is everybody's in panic mode. The last 2 weeks, I say this week, we're all kind of returning to some kind of normal. The market definitely has some value to lose based on how long we are all here at home, how long so many of the industries have been shut down or furloughed. I do think because there are always motivated people that buy and sell real estate, I think we may see a bump of moving June, July, where people who have to get into a new school district are going to make that move to get their kids registered in the new schools before the new school year starts. So I think there may be a bump there. But then after that, yeah, probably second half of third quarter, fourth quarter, I think there's going to be some real opportunities for investors. Absolutely. And so I would be getting anything I'm not in love with that I have some equity in. I would probably get on the market, get it off, get my equity out, get that cash out, and just park it somewhere and be ready to hunt come third quarter, fourth quarter.
So this is a question that I know you've been asked recently. I've heard you answer it. There are enough people on this chat now, or on this webinar now, that statistically, a couple of them at least are thinking about moving later this year.
Mm-hmm.
What should I be thinking, Peter, if I need to move later this year, meaning I'm going to need to sell my house, I'm going to need to buy another house? Should I be worried? Should I be trying to time it perfectly? What should I be thinking as a prospective home seller and then home buyer in this market?
Well, they're two totally different ends of the transaction. If I'm a home seller and I need to move in 2019, I'm putting my home on the market next week. look, I don't want to create panic, but there are enough things fundamentally changing that the market is going to be different. We've never lived through a pandemic before. We've never had industries wholesale shut down because of a health concern. You know, it's interesting, Slocomb. During the Great Recession, at absolute worst, unemployment was 15%. If you factor in underemployment, which is people who were working part-time that wanted to work full-time, or people that just gave up trying to find a job, it was more like 20%. We're already over 9% in just 3 weeks' time. And up until that, we had an incredibly low unemployment rate. We were like 2% unemployment. So that jump over a short period of time has been significant. So if I need to move this year, if I'm not compromised, if my health is not compromised, where I would be putting myself in danger with COVID any more than anyone else, I'm probably get on the market right away. And I may not be totally ready for that. And we've had some clients that weren't ready, where we've really pushed them to get on the market as quickly as possible, even if their home isn't perfect. Even if the moving isn't totally convenient, that's fine. There are enough empty Airbnbs that you can find a short-term place to stay for a couple months and then buy and move when you're ready. The reality is none of us know what's going to happen on the other end of this thing. Nobody knows how long we're going to be furloughed or basically residents in place. None of us know how long it's going to take for the pandemic to settle. None of us know how long it's going to take to get control of people who are ill and help them get the right recovery. And we don't know how long it's going to be before we're able to go back to work. So even if it's just 4 to 6 more weeks, it's still going to have a major impact on people's ability to consume, to purchase real estate. So the way we're telling our clients is, look, we as a team, we know how to sell houses. We know how the rules are right now, and we know how to play by the rules, and we know how to win by the rules, and we know what values look like. If you punt, let's just see what happens 3 months from now. Yeah, you could do that, but we don't know what the rules are. We don't know what the market's going to do. We don't know how profound the economic shift and impact is going to be from all these industries shut down. So for us, this is your equity. We don't think you should be gambling with your equity right now. We think you should be selling now and locking in what you can. And then if you need to park on the sideline and do a short-term rental, do that. The other thing I should say is, and then I'll stop talking for a second, Slocomb, is if you don't sell now, expect your home will be worth less when you do sell. And recognize that when homes go down in value in Cincinnati, when we reappreciate, we appreciate historically at 3% per year. So if the market just loses 10% of your value, that's going to take you at least 3 years to get back to where we are today. So if you're not moving now, you may not be moving for a while if you're really married to your price. Hope that helps.
That's great. Thank you, Peter. With all of this mortgage forbearance talk, with margin calls and liquidity issues, do you see the mortgage lending landscape changing in the near future? And if so, do you have any idea what will happen?
That's a real issue. Mortgage liquidity is a real issue right now. And Slocomb, I don't think I'm qualified enough to answer that question. There are people watching this Zoom who are more qualified than I am to answer that question. I do know this, and the ability for lenders to loan right now is being challenged right now because of some unintended consequences of what the government has done to try and facilitate cheap, low interest rates for mortgages. And we could have a double whammy, not unlike we had a double whammy last time around, where, it already has somebody here clearly knows more than I do, said the landscape has already changed. Well, there you go. It has, right? Lenders are requiring more highly qualified applicants to earn a loan. Some of them have been raising mortgage rates to slow down the applicants. The reality is, if we see somebody posted that some people have said that unemployment could hit as much as 30%, which I buy that. I don't know where that number is coming from, but it makes sense because so many industries are just being wholesale shut down. If we have unemployment drop by 90% and it becomes more difficult to qualify for a loan, or mortgage originators don't have the liquidity to turn things around as quickly, it could be a massive double whammy. So, in the Great Recession, which was brutal, and this might help a little bit, Slocomb, we peaked, we dropped, and then we kind of went like that. And this rise over run in values was basically for about 2 years straight, the average sales price in Cincinnati dropped 1% per month for about 2 years straight, which was brutal. I think probably what we're going to see this year around, because the unemployment is happening so much quicker, is it's going to be more like this. Again, I don't know. This is just what I think is going to happen because unemployment is so steep and because the mortgage industry is already challenged. The other difference, because I don't want to freak people out, is that during the Great Recession, the government was really reticent to take action. And the fundamentals of the real estate industry were so terrible that there was so far to fall, and the government was slow to respond in saving things. So I think we are going to devalue faster than we did in the Great Recession, but I also think we're going to hit bottom a little bit sooner, I hope, and I believe that we will recover way faster than we did during the Great Recession. The Great Recession was like this. Basically, from 2010, sorry, you can't see this, from 2010 to 2012, we were flat in values before we started to appreciate the slightest bit in 2013. So I think it's going to be a steeper fall. I think we'll bottom out faster, and I think that we'll recover more quickly because the government is being so proactive, throwing money at multiple industries and at the real estate and mortgage industry specifically.
I see a lot of messages coming in about mortgage lending.
Yeah.
Some of these things, I would recommend that you contact a mortgage lender to get these questions answered. Happy to give some recommendations after this webinar is over. I will say that a lot of these things, especially regarding mortgage forbearance and the way that the government is gobbling up mortgage-backed securities, don't forget that for your investment properties, local and regional portfolio lenders are still an option. I'm actually getting ready to start the refinance of a duplex on an adjustable rate, a commercial adjustable rate mortgage, because it's a property I've decided I'm going to hold on to for now, and I know I'll be selling it in a few years. And I know that that loan is less likely to be impacted by all of this because it will still, because it's not being affected by the new federal regulations and policies. Here's a juicy question that a lot of us have been struggling with for quite a long time. How do you think this will affect the construction industry? Will I finally be able to get affordable contractors?
Again, that's outside of my area of expertise, but it would strike me as something that is very possible, yes.
One thing that Peter and I have both discussed is that given the potential high unemployment and underemployment rates, if you are in business for yourself, this could be a really good time to be hiring because more better talent is going to be available to us here soon.
Yes.
I know personally, I'm at a point where I consider very often whether hiring is the solution to some of my contractor problems. And it looks more and more like I'll be able to get good talent later this year who will be interested in working for me.
Can I put this in context for an investor, Slocomb? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go for it.
So, because there's a lot of transactional investors in this group, right?
Yes.
So in a normal market, prices go up. So if you buy a property to flip here or wholesale, over the period of however long it takes you, let's say 3 months to do the property, to make the improvements and get it ready for sale, or 6 months if it's a bigger project, time is on your side, right? Because as time is evolving, the value of the property is appreciating. And so there's been a little bit of a built-in safety net for people that flip houses and to a lesser extent for wholesalers. Recognize now that if we are in this kind of a market, Or if we're in this kind of a market, that time is not on your side. If you buy it here and you're doing your flipping, over time it devalues. And so you got to be really good at two things. The first one is buying right. And the second one is really moving, being highly efficient in moving that renovation process through. Now, the great news is it's going to be easier to buy things, but you definitely want to make sure you're buying right if you're in that transactional end of things.
This is a speculation question, so take it with a grain of salt, but how far do you see home values dropping?
Anything I say has a 99% chance I'm wrong. So
yeah, right. It's a question that is on a lot of people's minds and hearts, and a couple of people have asked it.
You know, during the Great Recession, Slocomb, the average sales price in Cincinnati dropped to, if I'm not mistaken, about $160,000. In February, which was the best month ever, second best February ever, and the highest February average sales price we've seen on record, the average sales price was $223, if I'm not mistaken. So from the nadir, right, the Great Recession, to last month, which was the best month ever, before COVID hit, it's about a 24% difference, if I'm doing the math right in my head, maybe 20% difference in price. So could we expect to see a 20% drop in values over the next 6 months? That would be brutal, but it may be the case. I think the adjustment is going to happen faster on this one because unemployment is going to skyrocket. And I also think it's going to recover faster. Oh, there's a great question here. What indicators do you look for when the market has reached a potential bottom or starts to turn? Can I just call that one out, Slocomb?
Absolutely. I was going to ask that.
Yeah. So you're not going to look at sales. You're going to look at the rate with which new sales are happening. And from a realtor's perspective, your agent should be able to show you in the market segments that you're interested in. Your agent should be able to show you how many new sales in that market segment are happening now versus 6 months ago, or now versus 3 months ago. That's going to be one of the signs. Another one is when you start seeing the prices level off. And the third one would be tracking gains in unemployment. During the Great Recession, every morning I would look to see how many once a month they would post how many new jobs were added to the economy. When you start seeing the jobs go from negative to jobs starting to be added to the economy, that's when you know that the country is starting to recover. Now, the housing market may lag those new jobs by 6 months or so, but that's when you know things are starting to come back out and the economy is starting to recover, because employment is one of the big drivers of residential real estate value. Charles is correcting me in saying values dropped 34% during the Great Recession. That may be the case, Charles. That's probably, as a country, and recognize that that's going to factor in all of the insanity that was going on the coasts and the speculative markets. So in Cincinnati, it was roughly 25%. Let's see.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you were talking about flipping in a downward in a downward arrow market, as you were drawing,
depreciating, yeah. Mm-hmm.
In a depreciating market, the question come up: how does the impact on transactional investors differ from the impact on buy and hold investors? And I'll go ahead and go for it, Peter.
Yeah, that's a great one. Thank you for pulling that up. So here's what I think hold people want to do is, and this is my intention, the people that were investing in the Great Recession had the luxury of time on their hand. They were, you could do that iteratively because it lasted so long and the values kept going. The play I'm going to run during this is probably going to be, as soon as I see that major drop in prices, I'm probably going to pick up one or two, as many as I can, distressed sales and do whatever improvements are necessary to stabilize it, and then refinance out of those within 6 months and do it again. That drop we talked about, I don't think it lasts that long. It might be 6 to 12 months. Again, nobody knows. I can't read the future, but I think the drop is going to be faster, and I think the recovery is going to be faster. So I want to get in on that front end from some distressed sellers and be able to refi out 6 months later and do it again, or hopefully even potentially a third time if I'm a hold guy, because that's how I can get my equity, my capital to work for me as many times as possible through this cycle. Again, I think it's going to be more extreme, but I think it's going to be shorter. So we got to be on our A game early on as things start to adjust.
So another answer to that question, one of the reasons that it's different for buy and hold investors is that that was all very helpful. Thank you, Peter. Another thing to consider for buy and hold investors. To be honest, Peter, I'm getting really lucky. My connection is cutting out while you're talking, but by the time you're done, it comes back. So I missed some of what you said, to be totally honest. But I will say that one difference for buy and hold investors is that we have rents that we collect that cover our expenses, which means that our cash flow may drop, but we have a buffer that sustains us. In a depreciating market, the one thing you want to avoid is needing to sell.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
As a flipper, if your profitability is based on transacting, you're probably going to have to sell that property at some point. You don't want to have to do it in a depreciating market. You get an opportunity for a property that you know that you want in your portfolio, but you think values may drop a bit after you buy it. Knowing that someone else is going to buy it now if you don't, get it rented, get that cash flow running. And ride out the storm. Cash flow is kind of like oars for your boat when you're stuck on the ocean. So let's make a transition with our questions, and you guys are having you guys have some great questions. We'll get to these here soon, but let's look more towards the future and what it is that we should be thinking and what it is that we should be doing right now. So Peter, I want to ask you specifically about your experience during the last recession. In 2008, you went into the recession as an agent who did a couple of transactions a month. Yep. And by 2013, you came out of it leading the top sales team in the greater Cincinnati area. How did you do it?
The first thing I had to fix was my mindset. And I knew that it was pro time. And I knew that I need to step up. I need to take responsibility for everything that was happening in my life, and I needed to start bringing my A game to my life. The second thing was that I was angry at the situation I was in, and anger is awesome fuel. You know, it burns real fast, but it's explosive, and you can do a lot with it if you've got it channeled right. I cut costs. And then I went really, really aggressive on generating opportunities, lead generation, right? So I was prospecting, outbound lead generating 2 to 3 hours a day. I was door knocking on the weekends. When I wasn't doing one of those things, I was practicing my communication skills, my scripts, my dialogues, my objection handlers, a lot of affirmations. I hired a coach. I actually couldn't afford one. I didn't tell my wife for the first 4 months that I had hired this person because we couldn't afford him. And he was transformational in helping me get through this and grow my business in a rough time. And I went to a ton of masterminds just like this, swapping notes with other agents. What are you doing? What's working for you? And really got into humility mode and learning mode and growth mode.
So you focused on studying the business. You doubled down on your lead generation, and you quadrupled down your lead generation, and you got a coach. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And got over myself. Okay.
Yeah. Gotcha. What are you doing right now to prepare your team and your brokerage for what's happening in this market shift?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've told everybody, cut your business expenses by at least 20% and cut your personal expenses by at least 20%. The next thing, if I'm a small business owner, is I'm going for that. Somebody will correct me. This is a really smart group of people in this chat. Someone will correct me. It's the paycheck something program. It's the 3P program that's been going on that was identified on Friday with the CARES Act. And I would be all about making an application for that if I'm getting any kind of business. That's a huge opportunity. So first thing I was going to cut costs. If I'm an agent or if I'm an investor with a deal that's going on right now, I'm staying really close to anybody who's a part of that transaction, because if I'm not in their heads, they're getting the info from the media, and the media is there for a reason. They do a benefit. Thank you, Paycheck Protection Plan. Thank you, Rick. But if that's the only narrative of what's happening in their heads, they're going to freak out, pump the brakes, and bounce. And people forget why they enter into transactions, and we're there as their fiduciary to remind them about why they're doing this. So I'm cutting costs. I'm staying really close to everybody and communicating daily with everyone. This is part of a deal that's going on right now. I'm lining up my A buyers and my A sellers that understand the urgency of now and are prepared to and able to take action in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then if I have listings, I'm reducing prices on those immediately so my clients can get as much money as they can out of today's market. And then the last thing is, in terms of long-term, this is all about relationships. I'm going deep with my database, finding out how they are, what I can do to help them, reconnect with them. And I'm also going to identify who are the investors in my database that would be interested in the opportunities that we're all talking about showing up second half of Q3, Q4 this year.
Gotcha. So it sounds like a combination of go lean on your expenses, both personally and professionally.
Yes.
Focus on lead generation. To a summary of both of your answers to the last two questions, and be sure you're studying the business, studying what's going on in the market, and it helps to get a coach. I am imagining the exercise montage in a boxing movie. I think Rocky Balboa is just about to run up the stairs, throw his arms up in the air, and get in the ring with Apollo Creed right now, the way that you're talking. It sounds like your advice is the things that we all should have been doing the whole time anyways. And I hope the people who are listening understand that this isn't just for real estate agents.
Yeah, that's right.
It's really for all of us. Anyone who's doing their own lead generation, wholesalers, I'm looking directly at you, also looking at everyone else. Going lean, focusing on lead generation, finding the deals that are still out there, and making sure that you are doing the studying you need to do to adapt as things change.
Yeah.
So specific to transactional investors, I mean wholesalers and flippers, but anyone who is buying real estate with the expectation of selling it soon, what do you think they should expect? Going to ask about a few specific things. Okay. What do you think that they should expect regarding supply? Supply being owners who are interested in selling and interested in selling at a discount.
I mean, I think there's going to be more opportunities, Slocomb. I think, it's terrible to say, but there's going to be a lot of people that have lost their job, dual income households where both people have lost their job or at least aren't working right now. I think there's some short-term money being pumped into the economy. I was on a call like this earlier and was watching the speaker, and he was basically saying, it's like it's wintertime all of a sudden, and the federal government is burning money to keep everybody warm. It's not sustainable. Ultimately, part of this is going to have to work its way through, and people are going to lose their jobs. I think the play is how do you get to the people that have lost their jobs? How do you get to those people first? The ones that have equity that haven't bought their home in the last 3 or 4 years, because prices have been going like this for the last 3 or 4 years. So it's got to be someone that's been in their home for at least 4 or 5 years, has some equity and has unfortunately lost their job and needs to make a move. Short sales are going to be a thing again, and we may be having to negotiate short sales all over again.
What about demand in the market, home buyer activity? How do you think that'll compare to what we've seen the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's going to wane, right? I mean, we saw demand drop so much. We saw inventory drop so much over the last 4 or 5 years that the narrative hasn't been about demand. It's been about the lack of supply. Well, the narrative is about to change. We're about to see much more supply, and we're also going to wind up seeing less demand.
The question is, how do you think home buyer activity will move forward compared to where it has been?
Yeah, luxury is going to get killed, right? Super luxury will do fine, but that luxury part will get hurt. The trade up buyer. So smart money trades up in a down market. If the value of your home drops 10% and your home is worth $150, that's $15,000. If the home that you're buying was $300,000 and it drops 10%, it's now 270. It's dropped. Sorry, if it drops 15%, it's dropped $45,000. Well, the delta there is $30,000. So smart money trades up in a down market. So you'll see trade up buyers, and first time buyers always exist. They're actually what create liquidity in the market. Liquidity trickles up in the real estate market. It starts with those first time buyers that buy the first time home, so those guys can trade up. So it'll be interesting to find out which segments of the economy are hardest hit and how much of them are employing first time buyers, I guess is the answer.
Gotcha. Speaking to what you think will happen to property values, what do you think the differences will be in the impact of property values between, let's say, a starter home buyer, a house that was valued, that was bought for around 300,000 or worth around 300,000 in 2019, and that luxury market of 500,000 plus? How do you think those properties of those values will be impacted differently?
Well, generally, the more expensive a home is, the more value it's going to lose, right? Because there's less people who can afford it, and people's wealth is tied more to things like the markets and the income. When you lose a job in that price range, it's a lot more impactful. So, and there's always going to be more demand for first-time buyer inventory because there's so many more first-time buyers. And the millennials still are the largest generation ever, and they still are of home buying age. So we're still going to see transactions happen there. So I think you'll see the least amount of loss in value in the entry level and the trade up level. Slocomb, stuff under $200,000, we're still getting multiple offers on. But stuff above 300, it's like crickets. I shouldn't say it's dramatic. Over 500, it's crickets. That 3 to 5 is softening really quickly.
I will say what I just heard Peter say, talking about the variation in what will happen to property values. If I want to get into flipping, or if I want to make sure that my flipping can stay regular, get back to my steak and potatoes business, I'm going to stick to flipping starter homes.
Yes.
Because the buyer demand will still be higher there, and there should be less fluctuation. So if I'm new, or if I want to get back to basics, I'm gonna flip starter homes. So how about this question we can answer together?
Yeah.
What should buy and hold investors be expecting with regards to supply, inventory, owners wanting to sell?
Yeah, more. There'll be more supply. There will be more. The people who choose to sell, the people that choose to sell in a down market are always more motivated than in a balanced market or a hot seller's market like we've seen. So any seller is going to be more motivated. There's going to be a little bit of denial for the sellers, or anger or denial, right? For people that don't have strong real estate agents educating them on their new reality. So if I'm a hold guy, I'm probably not going to see many deals on the market on the MLS for probably another 3 to 4 months. And then I think those will start populating as people come to acceptance and the financial pressure is greater, and some of the money that's been pumped into our system has worked its way through it, and some of these challenges still exist. That's where I think my buy opportunities start to show up.
Yeah, one thing that it's unfortunate that people are going to lose money on some investments here soon. But for those of us who stay adaptable, who do our lead generation and who study, one of the things that I think will happen is that this will be a period of growing pains. Some of us will learn how to adapt to what has happened and whatever is coming, and some of us will not. And those of us who don't will feel like they need to sell because they don't understand the game they're playing anymore. I think that's going to create opportunity for us. With regards to demand for buying rentals, really the competition that we're feeling with other buyers, how do we think that the competition is going to change? I'll say that I think the competition is going to remain pretty high. Cincinnati is still going to be a great cash flow market. Whatever great cash flow market means at the time, it may be less, but it'll still be better than New York or LA or any coastal city. I see people leaving the stock market and wanting to get that capital invested somewhere else. And to what you were saying earlier, we still have basically good economic fundamentals, and the bounce back should happen much more quickly. What do you think, Peter?
I think you're spot on. I think, Slocomb, that the coastal money will still buy large-scale investment properties. But I also think that there are going to be way more small and medium-size opportunities that the coastal guys still don't want to get involved with because it's not big enough. And the local investor population, there's a lot of fair weather investors throwing money at dumb deals right now. And I think those guys will go away. So I do believe for small and medium-sized projects and investment opportunities, there will be more. And I think the potential returns will be greater also.
So for buy and hold, and we're going to go through a couple more questions, and then I'll make sure that we can get these questions answered. When it comes to demand, what do we think will happen, not to rental values, because I think that's a separate question, but demand for apartments? And I think this question is really more about what's going on with coronavirus at the moment. Demand from renters looking to get into new homes and new apartments for rent. Personally, I'm seeing a couple of different responses here. I see a lot of people who are deciding to delay their move. They have reached out to me about places that I'm currently renting. I follow up and they say, you know what, actually, we've decided we're going to wait until this whole thing blows over. I've also seen move. I think that's a combination of things. One, people hate being stuck at home with too many people in too small of a place. I have small one-bedroom apartments in a solidly C-class neighborhood. I have people who have good-paying jobs who just have to get out of the parents' house now because their parents are home all the time and they can't handle it. They are some of the people I speak with are very well qualified. I'll also say when it comes to, I would say demand is actually up, that there are more people than I expected looking to move right now, part of that being the weather. But also, if you have been following the 2 o'clock news briefings from the state of Ohio, and following what's happening in the state of Ohio with the coronavirus specifically, Hamilton County, where we are in Cincinnati, really is not seeing as much of an impact specific to COVID-19 as other parts of the state, specifically up north by Cleveland. And I think there are I think there's a higher proportion of people in Cincinnati who are not taking COVID-19 seriously. Whether or not they should be is not the question I'm trying to answer, but I think that there are a lot of people who want to treat life like business as usual, who are happy to be moving right now.
Slocomb, what do you think is...
Why don't we go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, demand for rental units is really, I think what we're really asking is, okay, how stable are my investments right now? Or how can I stabilize an investment that I have? I'm curious, what I hear you saying is you think people are still moving a lot based on your own experience. There's different people that are moving in different classes, right? So what is the demand for your solidly C-class one? And then the other question is for the A-class, because you said you had A and C units. How are you seeing demand change in your A-class inventory?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I'd like to add to that.
Yeah.
So with my A-class rentals, honestly, it feels like business as usual. These are all people who can either handle being home for a while, or they're in a service industry that allows them to work from home. I decided to be proactive about the potential financial hardships that would come from the economic climate based on coronavirus. Mm-hmm. It was last Sunday afternoon that the shelter-in-place order for Ohio was announced, and Sunday evening, I sent messages to all of my tenants, all of my buildings, every neighborhood, saying effectively, if you experience a financial hardship due to the coronavirus pandemic, I want to work with you. I can temporarily reduce your rent in exchange for a slight rent increase that becomes long-term as soon as your income is stable again. And I'll get back to that in a second. My A-class rentals, not a peep. Didn't affect them. They all read the email. A couple of them asked other questions, but my A-class tenants, not concerned at all about potential financial hardship. I actually have college students in a couple of those apartments down near over the Rhine who have gone home, like to Illinois, for because the rest of their school year has either been canceled or all of the courses are being taught online now, and they're fully expecting to pay rent through the end of the lease, even though the student isn't going to be in the apartment.
Yeah.
When it comes to Class C rentals, when I sent those messages out, I got some responses. I am personally a fan of the parts of the stimulus package the federal government has put together that is effectively putting cash in the hands of Americans under a certain income threshold.
Right.
I'm not a fan specifically of the way the income threshold works, but I do think it's great that they got something done quickly. I think it's phenomenal that those checks and those deposits will be going out here soon. I am not afraid of April 1. For those of you who listen to NPR and watch news on TV, I'm not worried about April 1st. I'm worried about April 6th. I'm worried about when rent's not due, but it's late. And I'm hoping that my tenants who are genuinely experiencing a temporary financial crisis due to the economic climate will have reached out to me before then. I've done a lot of research. Joe Fairless actually has a blog post about this, and what I've heard of all of the ways to handle a tenant who is, and I'm sorry you guys can't see me right now. If I turn on my video, you won't be able to hear me. Out of all of the things that I've seen, I've found two ways to help tenants get through this crisis that I like, that I would be willing to implement myself. Well, one of them I already am. The other one seems interesting. The one that just seems interesting is agreeing to take the security deposit as rent and then require the tenant to get deposit insurance. So that puts 1 month's rent in my bank account. I don't know how I feel about deposit insurance specifically. But it's better. That's a situation that's much better than just not getting rent, especially at a time when the courthouses aren't hearing evictions. The other thing that I'm looking at, my specific metrics for anyone who is currently paying market rent, what I'm willing to offer is either 1 or 2 months of half rent in exchange for a 5 or 10% rent increase on a new year lease that goes into effect as soon as the rent reduction is complete. That math works out a little bit in my favor over time. For the 50% reduction they'll get in 1 month, I'll get a 60% increase over 12 months. I think it's fair. It doesn't feel like a handout to me. And when I explain that situation to my tenants, you pay half rent, 5% rent increase. They tell me they need to think about it, which tells me I probably have the right math. Because if they were pouncing on it, I may be giving up too much. And if they were spitting in my face, I would know I was going wrong the other way. Quick question, what is a good renter profile or demographic to focus on for this recession? I would say people who make more money and have good credit. I'm not sure that the basics with regards to who makes a good tenant have changed. I will say that if you're considering renting to Section 8 housing voucher tenants, HUD will pay. You have to deal with the housing authority, but HUD will pay, and Section 8 tenants have the have the capacity to apply. I'm going to get the termination wrong. They can apply for a financial hardship that will get their voucher to pay the full rent. And that's right now, that's a lot faster than unemployment is getting paid out. A couple other quick things. In the interest of getting to you all's questions quickly, a couple other things about what I'm doing. And again, I'm sorry you can't see me. I have a couple Airbnbs downtown. And when coronavirus was labeled a national disaster, pretty much, pretty much all of my Airbnbs canceled, not only for the next couple of months, but into the summer. People who booked for July for some sort of summer vacation canceled. Airbnb started, they're reacting with guest-friendly policies, mandating accepted cancellations, mandating full refunds. They're now coming around and telling hosts that they will refund some of those canceled, 25%, I believe, of all cancellations due to coronavirus. I will say that I hired a manager for my Airbnbs. Her name is Lisa. She's fantastic. Happy to recommend her. If you have Airbnbs and you're looking in Cincinnati to have someone manage them for you. But a few things that we did in our Airbnbs is we immediately started marketing that they were private apartments with private entry. You can remain socially distant and still stay in our Airbnbs. We started advertising our thorough cleaning process, and I floated the idea of giving out little mini bottles of hand sanitizer as guest gifts, but we haven't been able to find any. So we haven't started doing that yet. But marketing specifically, if I were renting bedrooms in my house on Airbnb, I would not expect to be able to get bookings. But my manager has been able to get us almost fully booked again at a significant discount. One of the things in Cincinnati that's helpful for the short-term rental market, some people are not traveling for work, but the hospitals, especially Cincinnati Children's, are still a major draw into the city. If someone's child is sick, they are traveling, coronavirus be damned, and they will need a place to stay. So even within Airbnb, even within the short-term rental space, this is an opportunity to adapt. Well, how about this, Peter? If I had a property that I didn't think I'd be ready to sell for a year, thinking about where we expect property values to be in a year,
yep.
Do you think I should go ahead and gussy it up, make it real pretty to try to sell to a first-time home buyer, or should I expect that I'll be renting it for a while before I can really make money off of it?
Yeah, if you can get it out the door, get it out the door. Get on the market as quickly as possible, sell it for what you can, and move on. If you can't, then maybe, Slocomb, you start looking at some of the more creative ways of dealing with properties, like a lease purchase or a lease option, or or even like a land contract of some kind of iteration, where you've got a designated purchase price where somebody will be willing to pay a premium because they can't qualify for the mortgage yet, but they get to secure the property. That might be a great strategy if you can't get the property done in time and the market does what we think it's going to do.
This is another more lender-oriented question. How easy will it be to get to refinance my properties right now?
Yeah, again, this is not.
I can jump in. Sure, I can jump in and start to answer that. So a couple of my business partners and I have flirted with the idea of refinancing and holding instead of selling. And I have one partner with whom I'm refinancing and holding, and one partner with whom I'm still selling. One of the nice things about the refinance process is that when I'm refinancing my property, I don't have to convince a buyer of what it'll be worth in the future. I have to convince an appraiser of what it was worth based on the comparable sales from the last 6 months. So I don't know, and Peter is going to be better for answering this question, so I'll pose it to Peter. When it comes to a refinance, set aside the question about who's lending money. When it comes to an appraiser who's going to be going out to appraise a property on my refi, how long will it be before the appraiser starts valuing my property lower because of the economic climate?
Weeks. Any good appraiser is going to know what's going on, right? You'd have to have your head in the sand as an appraiser not to understand how the market is shifting. End of April, probably, I would say, is where we're.
So if the appraisal for my single family or my duplex is based on comparable sales,
Yeah.
Is an appraiser going to be able to justify appraising my property below comps because of what's happening in the market?
It's a great question. I have seen appraisers. I have given appraisers, when there's been a question of value on some of our properties, I have shown appraisers directly comparable homes during the Great Recession. And I've had appraisers tell me, yes, but you're not factoring in the absorption rate and the fact that inventory is growing. And on the first page of the appraisal, many people don't know this, on the first page of the appraisal, before the appraiser starts identifying the comparable sales that they use to determine value, they actually identify whether it's balanced market, oversupplied, or undersupplied. And if it's an oversupplied market and they start seeing that, we're starting to see a little bit of that in some market segments, that's enough for them to decide to appraise it lower than past sales.
I have several questions here surrounding what will happen to landlords as their tenants get laid off, lose their jobs, are unable to pay rent. That is, I can start to answer that. Can you provide perspective for where you think rents will go as the real estate market corrects in the third quarter? Historically, in a recession, rents are the last thing to go down. And all things considered, especially with how sharply this recession is hitting us, the average American renter has no savings, under $400 in the bank, and so they're going from relatively gainfully employed to nothing all of a sudden. With the market fundamentals still being good, if we can bounce out of this here soon, if people stay home and stop buying masks to wear when they walk their dog, then those people who are getting laid off will be getting jobs back because those employers and those businesses will need employees. Thoughts on the expectation of the impact on the commercial real estate market. So a lot of this is still up in the air. A lot of this is still playing out as we go. We're 3 weeks in. It's great that we're asking these questions, especially for those of us who are readying ourselves to adapt to changing times. One of the things I'm seeing in your questions, specifically the way you're asking, the participants are asking questions about lending and about where rents are going. It may make sense to do a repeat of this conversation a month from now. Maybe with Peter, it may make sense to specifically get a high level mortgage loan originator on here to continue this conversation. I think with a lot of this, as Peter has said several times, there's no way of telling, and if we give specific answers, all we're doing is guaranteeing that we are wrong. What I will say, though, is that for those of us who adapt, for those of us who keep our eyes up and our ears open, and look for the ways to make this work, we're going to make it. We're not only going to be fine, but we'll have the opportunity to gain from the loss of the people who weren't ready to adapt, who weren't ready to change with the times. I
Yes, look,
don't personally. Go ahead.
this shouldn't be doom and gloom. This is game time. This is money is made when the market's down. To quote Captain Planet here, it's bye-bye time for HGTV wannabes. Like this is where fortunes are made, is when the market goes down. And the people that are here on this call right now are thinking the right way, and they're going to take the right action. And 2 years from now, when we're on the other side of this, there's going to be a lot of wealth built that happens in the next 12 months.
Yeah. We're getting some funny stuff in chat. This is definitely a time when the amateurs are going to bail. One of the frustrations that I have with the real estate sales industry is how easy it is for someone to get a license. Mm-hmm. That low barrier to entry means that you don't have to be all that professional, and you don't have to be all that studied to call yourself an authority and get a commission for helping someone buy a house. That's right. The people who were floating because the tide was high are going to have to find other waters. And that goes for realtors, loan originators, landlords, flippers, wholesalers. I'm pumped too, Brandon.
Yeah, me too, Brandon.
Go ahead.
Totally. No, I was echoing you said that goes for everybody here in this group. Everyone that has a role in real estate, it's going to separate the men from the boys, and that's game time. It's pro time. This is the Great Recession. I was an agent. There was nothing remarkable about me, and I chose to be a pro during the hard time and came out on the other end running a pretty awesome business. And the people that are a part of this call are the ones that are taking action and going to grow also. It's cool.
Where do I find a good coach? Please let us know what industry you're in.
Yeah, that's right.
Buy and hold. Where do I find a good buy and hold coach? Sure. Personally, I go to books and I go to networking meetups. This Cincinnati's best ever real estate investor mastermind was very helpful for me when I was a newer investor. I think when I started going to this meetup, I was just in the process of either getting ready to buy or buying my second deal. I'm glad I'm not there anymore. And it's because of the networking, the learning I've done. If you're wondering about a coach who's not expensive, another opportunity would be to join a mastermind. One of the things that's changing, and this actually, I heard this from Simon Sinek in a video he put on YouTube maybe yesterday. One of the things that's changing about society that's likely not to go back is this Zoom webinar right here. The capacity to network and share and come together digitally. The capacity's always been there, but it wasn't until we had the need that people really started doing this. I have several ideas. One of the things I'm thinking about personally is putting together like a book study group, literally a book study group. I've got a couple of apartment and buy and hold books that I need to read that they don't have on Audible, so I can't listen to them, which means it's going to take me a long time. And I'm wondering if there are people who want to go through those books with me through Zoom calls, read on your own time, get together, and mastermind. Peter, could you speak to Todd's question that just came in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what is the one key for someone getting into the business, and what's the biggest mistake you see new agents make? Okay. The number one most important thing for an agent to be successful in their first year and beyond is basically committing to some degree of skill in at least two forms of lead generation. This is not a marketing business. This is a sales business first. It's a service business, but if you don't know how to create a lead to serve somebody, you're out of luck and you're out of business. So in your first year, you really want to be focusing on 1 or 2 lead generation sources. One of them must be your sphere of influence, because that's the long-term goal. The other one is something that you can do outbound that's immediate. You know, the classic one was open houses, except you can't do open houses anymore. But whatever that other thing is, whether you're calling for sale by owners, whether you are, whether you're door knocking, whatever it is, there's got to be one that's sphere and one that's a proactive, outbound, cost-effective way of generating opportunities. In terms of the biggest mistake, is confusing activity with productivity. Assuming you're in to win and you recognize you're a 100% commission job and you need to do something and you're committed to doing something so that you can make some money, don't confuse activity with productivity. Activity is spending 2 hours trying to figure out what your email signature looks like. Productivity is spending 2 hours learning how to talk to for sale by owner on the phone.
Yeah. That's awesome. Hearing from some of you that you would be interested in doing a Zoom webinar book study. Thank you, Karen. Send me your email address and I'll make sure that I connect with you on that. On this note, for those of us who are excited right now, thinking about the opportunities that are going to come available, and for those of us who got pumped up with Peter's words about what we need to be doing, quadrupling down on our lead generation, and if any of the rest of you were feeling that exercise montage from the boxing movie, we'll end our first ever Cincinnati's best ever real estate webinar with this. All right, guys, great. Thank you for coming. I'm sure that is copywritten, so I hope it doesn't get reproduced and isn't used to make any money. But that was fun. Great. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Captain Planet, for telling us who you actually were. Not who I guessed, so job well done there. And great. We will have some iteration of this on the last Tuesday of April. Thank you all again. Take care,
guys.
and watch out
Appreciate
on the
it.
Facebook group for the recording.